So it has been a hot minute since I last made a Why It's Awesome video, as the channel kinda changed direction and style a while back and that series got a little lost in the shuffle. But as I'm currently stuck without proper access to my office workspace and regular equipment that I would use to make my current videos due to lockdown, and since I'm assuming that people would rather see me upload than not, even if it is in the quote-unquote old video style, now seems a good time to revisit this series. So recently I put out a poll asking which of a few topics you'd like me to do a video on, and the anime The Promised Neverland won that poll. Well, actually, when I first checked the show, Alice in Borderland won it, but then I started writing that script and got halfway through it and suddenly the results switched at the last minute and Promised Neverland suddenly had a single percentage lead, so that's cool, thanks for that. Doing 2 videos now. Kinda only want to do one of these, but you know, whatever. It's fine, it's fine. Now, jokes aside, both of these shows are incredibly interesting, and I'm very happy to talk about them, but today we're going to be talking specifically about Promised Neverland. And you might be thinking at this point, well, what is Promised Neverland, and why, Mr. Drambles, who I'm going to subscribe to right now because you're so effortlessly charming and have exceptional taste, why is it, as the title of this video would suggest, awesome? Well, Promised Neverland is an anime adapted from the manga series of the same name that was serialized in Weekly Shonen Jump, one of Japan's best-selling and longest-running manga magazines. It follows the story of 11-year-old Emma, a plucky young, bright-eyed and orange-haired girl living at an orphanage known as Gracefield House, alongside 37 other children including her best friends, the white-haired math prodigy and model student Norman, and the equally intelligent but slightly more emotionally despondent little emo boy Ray, because it's anime. So of course there's a little emo boy. Gotta have a black-haired little emo boy. It's like in the commandments or something. Anyway, what makes this show immediately compelling is our initial introduction to this setting is curious. For a good chunk of its runtime, the first episode almost plays out like a slice of life show. We meet these kids and the loving parental figure they call Mother, a woman in a maid dress named Isabella who runs the orphanage and takes care of them, and everything is lovely. There's a genuine sweetness and joy to the day-to-day lives of Isabella and her orphan children, and it's quite easy to get swept up in the happy, family-like dynamic of it all. Our very first introduction to Emma is her being this big sister figure to the younger children and playing around with them while they get ready to have morning breakfast as Isabella lovingly watches on and smiles, and it's really nice. But as the episode goes on, while this family-like image never goes away, we do have several questions. The orphanage is idyllic, blissful even. A beautiful, well-maintained mansion of a building with a stunning garden area that seems to span for miles. The kids all lead happy lives, spending their days eating delicious home-cooked food and playing in the grassy, blue-skied outdoors. However, there are some qualities to this orphanage that are unusual. Not bad, per se, just strange. All of the children of this home are given the same white uniform to wear. They have to take regular mandatory tests under the guise of homeschooling, but that don't seem to really be for anything. And perhaps most unusual of all, every one of them has a unique large number on the side of their neck. And now, I'll be honest, anyone who has seen this show will know what I mean when I say this, but it's a little hard to talk about The Promised Neverland without spoiling a lot of important stuff. So while I will go more in depth on the show and why it works so well for me that I'm literally making a video about why it's awesome and why you should watch it, I really don't want to spoil the experience if you then do so for the first time. So I won't say what exactly any of these things, the numbers on the neck, the uniforms, etc., I won't say what they mean. However, I will say, because I think it's already clear to anyone after even just hearing the gist of this setup, that this orphanage isn't exactly what it seems. Somewhere amongst the happy-go-lucky blissful presentation it puts forward lies hints towards a secret beneath its surface. And by the end of episode 1, you find out what that secret is. And boy, oh boy, it's a big one, it's a doozy. Now, after discovering the truth behind the orphanage, Emma, Norman and Ray find themselves in a situation where they must plan, plot and engage in battles of wits in an incredibly compelling, tense and fantastically well-paced roller coaster with all the odds stacked against them. I think what makes Promised Neverland so engaging for me is just how fresh it feels. For those of you who don't know, Shonen is the manga and anime industry's bread and butter. That is to say, shows aimed at young teen boys, and they are very often filled with action and combat and humour. Even if you aren't familiar with the word, you'll certainly have heard of some of its more famous genre entries, even if you've only dipped your toe into the waters of manga and anime. Dragon Ball, One Piece, Naruto, Bleach, My Hero Academia, Demon Slayer, Attack on Titan. All these titles fall under that umbrella. Household names, loved by many, that at their peaks all sold or are still selling millions of volumes. These kinds of stories, that is to say, fight-heavy tales of powerful characters, often teens, exploring exciting worlds while they take on some great evil, be it demons, or ninjas, or pirates, or superheroes, all the while getting stronger as they journey on some epic quest and rising to challenges put forward by increasingly more powerful foes, are the backbone of Shonen Jump magazine, and to some extent, the entire shonen genre. And while there has been no shortage of important, culturally relevant, industry-changing powerhouses to come out of this style of manga and anime, they're also a dime a dozen. There is no shortage of this kind of story within these two industries. It gets to the point that when we hear shonen anime or manga, the image conjured in most people's mind is probably something like this. You hear shonen and you probably think Dragon Ball Z, you probably think Naruto, to the point that I would actually argue it's almost to the industry's detriment that we sometimes call shonen a genre as opposed to a demographic categorization, because when outliers that aren't battle animes pop up, describing them as shonen anime can create misconceptions due to the associations we have with that word. Promise Neverland is a shonen. That's a technically correct statement. It originated in Shonen Jump magazine. But what makes it special is it does not feel at all like the kind of thing we associate with that word. This isn't another story of superpowered teens fighting their way through a world of romance and rivals on their journey to become the strongest of all time in their respective universes. The protagonist kids of Promise Neverland are smart and, by the standards of their peers, agile, sure, but they're not superheroes. They're children. Children who play tag, who enjoy hide and seek, who like games and getting tucked into bed and are maybe a little bit sulky and huffy at times, who are naively optimistic, and then they're suddenly thrust into an uncomfortable truth about a life they love so much, and they have to do something about it from that incredibly limited perspective. The challenges the kids of Promise Neverland face can't be overcome by learning how to punch harder, or getting a more epic sword, or mastering the one magic move that lets them become victorious in the tournament arc. These kids are extremely vulnerable. Once a certain truth is revealed, the genre of the entire show seems to do a complete 180, pulling this kind of comfortable, almost slice-of-life-esque blanket they spent a whole first episode building out from under you in one sudden swift reveal. Again, I worry I'm giving away too much here, even though I'm not really telling you what happens, but I just feel the need to compel people to watch this. This first season is really quite fantastic. I'm saying perhaps a little more than I'd like to, but the only reason I'm doing so is I really need to stress that there are some genuinely heavy stakes at play within this narrative, delivered in a way I've never really seen before in a shonen title. These events, when told through the perspective of mostly pretty normal-ish, kind-hearted, naive children, have stakes that can become genuinely frightening. This show, at its best, straight up becomes a thriller and a horror, one with an absorbing sense of dread and slow creeping scenes filled with nail-biting tension. To quote The Offspring, the kids aren't alright. But I think what really makes the whole thing work, even more so than the multiple incredible twists, the unpredictable narrative, the draw-you-in atmosphere, and the palpable and foreboding sense of this kind of ominous, dark quality that drips from every frame, is that beneath all this is a story that's deeply entrenched in optimism and hope. The kids are afraid of what they find and the new challenges they must now face, but Emma as a character is so deeply and innately kind and caring that she won't let it defeat her because of how much she cares about the people she has grew up around that she considers family. And we see this mindset begin to slowly infect and take hold in her friends too. And it's through this unwavering need for hope, not even for themselves but for others, that they empower and strengthen each other. Their loving bonds and mutual trust granting them the bravery to face the issues they come up against. Some of my favourite scenes in this show are the ones that put the plot on the back burner for a little bit and just take a breather to explore the interpersonal relationships between these characters, flashing back to things like how they'd help each other even as younger children when one would get sick. You really get a sense of just how much these characters care for one another and how much time has been spent cultivating that bond. And these characters and the relationships they foster meld wonderfully into a narrative with strong commentary on systems of oppression. I really went hard earlier in this video talking about how the kids aren't like other shonen protagonists in that they can't just get more powerful in order to overcome challenges, and that's because it's important thematically that these kids aren't powerful. They represent a sort of underclass in a hierarchical system that places them at the bottom, and everything within the narrative has been carefully chosen to reflect this. When you look at everything through this lens, all of the narrative choices become really clear. You know, it's odd for a shonen anime to not have a teen or adult protagonist, but when you realize what Promised Neverland is doing, you realize why these characters are kids. Their age is important, their lack of abilities is important, the presence of a guardian in their lives in charge of them is important. They aren't in charge of their own decisions, they don't get a say in what happens to them, they can be lied to and patronized, and it's accepted that this is fine because they're kids. And when you realise how powerless this makes them, then this becomes a narrative about this class of individual pulling back the curtain on what they've been told by the people above them is a happy little life and exposing the lies that keep them indoctrinated and static in their places under authority, unifying through strength in numbers and rising up against those systems. And I am sorry if I gave too much away there, but these ideas and concepts are so crucial to the core of what makes Promised Neverland so special to me. That said, unfortunately, it isn't perfect. There's some minor issues here and there, like there's occasionally a tendency for the show to get a little bit too anime, if you know what I mean, with somewhat expository dialogue, and there's a whole plot point that hinges on one kid having an innate quality that lets him remember everything that's ever happened to him going back as far as the womb, and it's like, sure, I'll go with it. It's a little out there and introduced as a kind of nonchalant thing pretty late in, but whatever. The rest of the show's so good, I'll buy the points where the kids are a little way too smart for their age, or cross that line just a bit into where your suspension of disbelief is a little challenged, but it does unfortunately have what I would consider one major flaw. And that is, and there's kind of no easy way to just bring it up as a point of discussion after heaping so much praise onto the show, but also there's no point dancing around the issue, one of the characters is really quite a racist stereotype. And it sucks so much because this show is so good and this character's presence in it is such a blight on it that as much as I wholly want to recommend the show on all of its strengths, I can never really feel comfortable doing so without giving this kind of big disclaimer. So yeah, the show is very engaging, but a few episodes in, they introduce a second caretaker to the house called Sister Crone, and she is a black woman. And at the point of season 1's finale, she is the most predominant depiction of a black character in the show, and she is constructed both design-wise and in characterization with a lot of tropes that historically have context in harmful, racist depictions of black women. In a show where none of the other characters are even drawn with lips, Sister Crone is depicted as a big-lipped caricature with a fearsome strength and physique, an unhinged personality prone to bouts of monstrous violence. And personally, I don't blame anyone if, in spite of the good things this show does, this was someone's stopping point. There's kinda no other way to say it, it's bad. And listen, if you're watching this as a fan of the show, I am not insinuating this is in any way a reflection on you. Clearly I am a fan, I mean look at the title of this video, but this particularly egregious problem on an otherwise exceptionally good watch is hard to ignore. Now having said that, there is a season 2. I haven't watched it yet because at the time of this writing it is still airing and I'm waiting for it all to come out, so there may be better depictions after this, and although I haven't read it yet and can't verify, I have heard that the manga does introduce other black characters that are handled way better. I don't think the author was intentionally malicious here, or anyone involved in the creation of the anime is either. I think there's some cultural context at play where we can often see racist depictions in anime because those design decisions are informed by imported Western media that had these problems, but creators in Japan don't necessarily have that cultural and historical context to know the harmful history behind these depictions. However, that unfortunately doesn't make the depiction any less uncomfortable. And to be honest, I don't know enough about what happened in the production of this character to make any assumptions either way, and quite frankly, as a white dude, I am not the authority on this to make excuses even if I wanted to. So while I don't want to get hung up on the discussion around her too much, it would have felt weird to gloss over it and not mention it. And for a more informed opinion on the matter, I'll be linking to 2 black creators blogs in the comments. One by an author called Lanesha Campbell on anti-blackness in anime, and another that's a review of the show in general from creator B-Hop, both of which discuss Sister Crone's representation. I'll also link to a really good video on the matter from a creator called Zeria, whose race I do not know, but the video is really good. I will say that with the exception of Lanesha Campbell's piece, all of these discussions contain more spoilers than this video though, so just be wary of that if that's something that's going to bother you. Anyway, it does suck that I have to end this vid on a bit of a downer note for a show that I think has a lot of positive and interesting things to say outside of this problem and is just generally engaging, but I do think it is important to criticize media. And not just the media we hate, but media we love. In fact, it's arguably especially true of media we love, because as tempting as it might be when you enjoy something to not be critical of its issues, and I don't mean like plot holes or whatever, I mean stuff like this, stuff that really should be engaged with critically, it helps no one to be sycophantic. And it's not just me who is saying this about the show. A lot of black viewers have expressed problems with this characterization, and when people tell you that they're having issues with how they're represented, it doesn't hurt you to listen, but it does hurt them to write off those issues. You can still like this show, I do, but I'm not prepared to defend or ignore some of its more egregious choices. The more we engage with critical discussions of media, the more we get better media. That's just how art evolves. Who knows, maybe this exact discussion happened in Japan at some point, and that's why later issues of the manga have this supposed better representation. I don't know, but I do think these discussions are worth having. So crony aside, to conclude the video, this is a show that is incredibly well paced, smart, engaging, emotionally involving, and with a lot of interesting commentary on issues of oppression, social hierarchies, and certain capitalist practices that if I went too much into might give too much away. It just very unfortunately has one really major flaw that might put you off, but if you're willing not to look past this problem per se, but acknowledge that it's there, but that there are still items of value surrounding it, then I do, with that big disclaimer, recommend this show. It's a damn shame it has the issue it does, but it is really, really, really good otherwise. Check it out and see what you think. Anyway, thank you all for watching this far. If you are new here, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing to my OnlyDans on the red button below. And if you really like this video, you can even support me through my special OnlyDans, also known as the Patreon link in the description, which has a fun bunch of exclusives on it, including access to an exclusive Discord channel where we all talk films and games, and a bunch of original short films, unused video scripts, and even some big movie pitches. No pressure on that one though. If you can't afford it right now, no big deal. Don't worry about it. Now, if you're a returning viewer, I just want to apologize real quick for not uploading in a while, but on top of being extremely busy in just life in general and not feeling particularly motivated or creative because of all the lockdown blues, I also really got in my own head with this idea that doing a video like this in what I now consider my quote-unquote older style was somehow like a massive step backwards from what I felt was a big leap forward for the channel with Wholesome Halloween. And I felt like I'd set this really high precedent in terms of quality with stuff like the live action segments in that video series and all the filters and just general style and delivery of things that I couldn't match now with my suddenly limited resources. And I know this might sound stupid, but I kind of had to get over that mental barrier before I could make something, because like I said, with it being locked down in England at the moment, a lot of my workspace and normal editing facilities and the recording equipment I borrow aren't available to me. And as much as part of me wanted to wait till I got all that back, I just don't know when that's gonna happen. You know, we're throwing around a potential date of June 21st over here for stuff to open back up properly, but that's still a good while away, and you know, anything could happen between now and then. It might be later, and like, I want to create for you guys. I really enjoy seeing people engage with this stuff. I'm honored that people are supporting me on Patreon now, as you can see from the credits currently scrolling. So rather than just being anxious that I can't put stuff out there because it won't be good enough and as a result doing nothing, I'm just going to do something and put stuff out there. And I've just got to accept that the videos are going to be more like this for a little while, and that's fine. It's not a step back, it's just a product of current circumstances. I still put all the work I can into this stuff and spend ages writing scripts, and it's not healthy to be only proud of the things that cost you loads of money for stuff like costumes and green screens and teleprompters and all that jazz. Not everything has to be super high concept to be worth the work, you know? Work's work. And I put the effort in, whatever the ending delivery format. Anyways, I'm rambling, so yeah, just basically, thanks for all your support, thanks for watching, please like, comment and subscribe to my OnlyDans, and I'll see you all in the next video.